Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Insura-Preneur podcast. I am joined by a powerhouse agency leader, the former owner of Colorado Insurance, Mike Mathisen. He grew the agency from $6 million to an astounding $130 million by mastering the systems that drive sustainable high margin growth. As you will learn in this podcast, Mike has been a client of mine for over 20 years, a member of my mastermind group, and by his own admission, I would say at the core of his success, besides his own personal leadership, his discipline, and his perseverance, is the ACOR system, a four-step marketing framework designed to automate client attraction, conversion, client optimization, and retention. Instead of chasing growth the hard way, Mike built a predictable, scalable, and wildly profitable model that allows agency owners to step back from the grind and take control of their business. So, for those of you who want to scale your agency without stress and turn it into an insurance factory, as Mike calls it in this podcast, this episode is your roadmap. Today, we have a special guest, and this may, in fact, be the only time I think we've had one guest in my podcast series, which includes the Connected Insurance podcast with Agency Revolution and now the Insura-Preneur podcast, a two-time repeater, three-time guest. I think Mike was a guest years ago when clearly things were rocking and rolling, and then a year and a half ago, and now Mike Mathisen, our guest, is at really a transitional period in his life. Which I will defer until later on in the conversation. But that being said, I think what we're about to discover, what we're about to hear, is one of the remarkable stories in the independent insurance agency industry, perhaps of all time, because I'm about to have a one-on-one conversation with the entrepreneur, the insurapreneur, the genius behind what may in fact be the fastest growing independent insurance agency in the country. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation with Mike Mathisen. Mike, how are you?
Hello, Michael. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. Thank you for that introduction. That was pretty awesome.
Well, you've got a story to tell, so it's my job to sort of guide this conversation through that story. So that being said, let's the bottom line, folks, is basically this. We started here, and now we're here, and where Mike started, as I recall, is roughly around $6 million in premium, and then ended last year with over $130 million in premium. So we've seen an agency with consistent growth. And so it's my job to kind of, I'm going to dive into Mike's brain and deconstruct the elements of what made that possible so that you can learn as much as you possibly can from the experience of somebody who really has mastered growth and peak valuation in the independent insurance agency industry. So, boom, without further ado, Mike, kind of an interesting question to start with. When you started in the industry, did you have did you imagine that you could possibly end up with an agency with $130 million in premium?
Well, no, of course not. I mean, it was never really, in the beginning, it was never about premium. It was about building something that I could rely on a steady stream of income, so I could provide for my family. And that's really what it was all about at the very beginning. I floundered for, 10 years of my career in the beginning. I've got 35 years in now. But first 10 years, I kind of went back and forth. I knew what I wanted to do, but it's difficult to put it together without guidance, without a strategy, without implementing the strategy. To go from 6 million to 130 million, no, I never really thought about that. Later on in my career, I thought, 100 million is certainly doable, and we were able to get to 100 million, and I'll get into that later on. But it was there was a turning point in my career, and the one thing that really turned it around was, and you're going to laugh at this, I quit selling insurance. I quit selling insurance, and was the tipping point, the turning point for me that
Mike,
made things go.
I think you and I have had this conversation before. I've had
Yeah.
the privilege of working with some of the best agencies and the best insurapreneurs in the U.S. and Canada over the years.
Yeah.
And those that have like truly scaled, like 10x or more, 20x or more. And Adrian, I'm going to ask you if you can figure out. We've got a little background. If I want to ask everybody to mute themselves if you haven't already, but yeah, Adrian, maybe you can help me there with muting. In fact, like within the last week, we saw one of your peers and for a brief time, a member of the mastermind group, Ellie Kaplansky, finally sell his agency. Likewise, probably the largest Main Street agency in America.
Probably, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
Ellie
So
he built a machine.
he built quite a machine, and he basically said the same thing. And I asked him this, this goes back 10 or 15 years. Sort of, it was probably in a podcast interview, and basically he said, the most important thing I did was my decision 20 years ago to never sell insurance again, period.
Yeah, I mean, that's important, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I just got to shut off my speaker here. Oh, there we go. Okay, good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So we're
that
back.
might have been the background noise.
So that being said, tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry and what it was like when you started.
I got into the industry in 1990, October of 1990. And I got into it because I was a real estate agent, and I was doing really well in the real estate business, but it wasn't a residual income. So that really bugged me. So I looked high and low, for something that would fit who I was and what I wanted to do with my career and my life, how I was going to provide for my family. And I stumbled on insurance. And my uncle was he had an independent agency back in Huntington, Long Island. And I got to talking to him, and he said, Michael, you got the gift of gab, man. Go into insurance. So I ended up with a captive company called Country Companies Insurance, and that really led me to the promised land. It was one of the things that really got me moving in the right direction. Good training, very good training, and got me thinking about the rest of my career.
Got it. All right. And then when did you and how did you switch to the independent system?
Sure, that was in January of 1997. So I stayed there for just a little over 6 years. And I bought a very small independent agency. They had like maybe a couple of 3-4 million in premium, very small. I probably paid too much for it. Didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but I got it together and figured it out, and got a few good preferred carrier contracts, Allied being one of them. Progressive, they were an easy contract to get, and they were very helpful and useful to build my business. Yeah, so that was kind of the way it started. Once I got into, and I had a couple of business partners in and out over the years, but the tipping point was the day that I decided to do nothing else but personal lines insurance, auto, home, umbrella, and toys. That was a huge decision for me. And that's when we started to take off in the very beginning.
And you would describe yourself as a niche marketer, and some people don't think of personal lines as a niche. Um, how would you describe your niche in personal lines?
Um, it's really pretty easy to describe. I mean, just two words called mass affluent.
Hmm.
That's my niche.
Right.
People who have a home, two car garage, put two cars in it. Maybe you have a boat, motorcycle, RV. Maybe you have kids that they drive vehicles.
Hmm.
That was my niche from the very beginning when I decided to do just personal lines. I didn't want to do high value. Didn't want to do that.
Hmm.
Definitely didn't want to do liability only policies. That was out of the question. Didn't want to
Right.
do that. Too much service work there.
Hmm.
Too much churn. Too much. So yeah, it was the mass affluent that made it work for me.
Got it. All right. I'm going to preface my next question with a little bit of context. You and I have seen, because we've worked together, been with other agencies, for years together.
Hmm.
And we've seen other agencies scale, and they didn't do it the exact same way you did. So, in other words, we've seen agencies that are really purely marketing driven keep getting to the next level. We've seen agencies that are in commercial lines, scale numerous times. We've seen,
Absolutely.
yeah, so we've seen different models. And so I'm kind of prefacing that, by I want to unburden anybody who thinks they have to do exactly what Mike Mathisen did in order to get to 130 million or get to their, to whatever their dream is or their aspiration is. But that being said, there's certain principles that I think we could discern or discover that are common among probably every agency that scales, regardless of which growth model they use, regardless of which market or niche they focus on. As you reflect on what worked really well for you, what do you think are some of the fundamental principles, not just the techniques, but sort of the core principles that you could rely on?
You know, probably the number one thing is you've got to hire great people. That's easily said. Um, but you've really got to figure out a way. And I had a lot of trial and errors, and I actually did pretty well, kind of mid-career towards the end of the career. After I was in it for a couple of years, made a lot of mistakes. You've got to hire some really good people, people that you can rely on, people that you can hold accountable, people that will that are on the bus and in the right seats. That's probably the biggest thing.
Hmm.
Um, and with your strategy, Michael, no matter whether it's personal lines, commercial lines, um, health insurance, whatever it is, whatever you've got as your product, you've really got to remain focused on what you're doing, and don't be like a squirrel going over here, going over there. Remain focused and keep
Ah,
right on the same track that you're on. Stay there. Um, and I guess one other thing is I see a lot of agencies where they want to grow, but they're hesitant to invest dollars, money into their business. You've got to invest in it. Even if you think
ah.
you can't afford it, you've got to do it.
Well,
I mean,
so when you say invest in the business, what kind of things are you thinking of? What comes to mind?
well, like for instance, so just going to throw this out there. How appropriate. Being in the mastermind group, that's investing in your business. Um, now we're talking about connections with people, and because you're going to run into problems as an insurapreneur. You're going to run into problems, so you need to be able to bounce those off of other people and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. What do you think about what I'm doing? How maybe you can think of something better. So you bounce it off of other people. So that's just one way to invest. The other thing is maybe like your agency management system. You've
Hmm.
got to invest in the best system that you think best for your agency. You
Right.
really do it. And of course, the people. You've got to pay your people really well
Okay.
because
Um,
it's gonna pay off in the end. It just will.
So, going back to core principles, hiring the best people, investing in the agency. Now, you also had what I think is remarkable clarity on the growth model that you chose, right?
Mhm.
And it's really in some ways is a, it's a little bit different in personal lines. The way you created a model. We'll get into some of the details on that that has to do with hiring producers and treating them like entrepreneurs. Now, we've known each other so long. I can't even remember when the light bulb went off or when the elements came together and you realized, oh, this thing has some legs to it. This has got some traction. When was that?
That was probably,
At least 20 years or
yeah, at
so.
least. So really what happened was around 2008 was that downturn in the economy, if you recall that.
Yeah, I recall that.
Um,
I launched a software company then. Yeah.
yeah, that was another turning point, another tipping point for me.
Was what?
Because it was a
The
tipping point for me because it was right around then that we were doing really well. We were building the agency. I had my model, hiring independent contractors. The contract that I had put together was really good,
Mhm.
um, meaning the agreements were really good with the independent agents. But everybody, consumers wanted to save money at that point in time, and I couldn't. The phone calls that were coming into the agency, the emails of people looking to save money, it was out of control. So I had to go on a hiring spree for more agents to come in and sell the product.
Right.
We grew exponentially 2008 to 2012. We grew
Hmm.
exponentially. It was
Hmm.
sheer chaos. For years, it was chaos.
Right. I,
We,
I,
we
re- I recall you coming to one mastermind meeting where you said, I think you said you hit 40% growth and you said, that's too much. I
it,
got to dial it back down to 30.
it was too much. It was
Yeah.
we because if you're growing too fast and you can't handle it on the service side, that was a real problem.
Hmm. Right.
You know? Yeah.
Okay.
It was fun looking back now. It was a lot of fun, but boy, it was rough.
Okay. So at some point you realize, you know what? I've got a model here and I can replicate it.
Correct.
And you
Yeah.
did. So I don't know. I can't recall how many states you're in right now.
We're in like 30 states right now, but
30
back in the
states.
day, we were only in two states. We were
Right.
in Arizona and Colorado. That was it.
Right. Right. I remember the early Arizona days. That was actually a sort of that was in a big expansion move when you started. I remember you were flying in and out of Phoenix or something every
Yeah, I
now and
did
then.
a joint venture with one of the other mastermind members.
Uh-huh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
And so that's you started expanding your geographic footprint. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
let's talk about the model. Um, you've called them entrepreneurs, contractors. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, so I really had two models that came together, but
Okay.
the 1099 contractor entrepreneur, they were the beginning of it, is where it kind of started. Um, what I would do is I bring them in and I would teach them how to generate leads, teach them how to build a book of business from scratch. And I would teach them. And I was the guy doing it at first. So I probably did it for the first 5 years where I would bring someone in, teach them, get them up and running. Then I'd go on to the next one and go on to the next one. Um, Hold on, there we go. So yeah, once I started doing that, I started to get some girth, so
Hmm.
premium started to come in. I remember when we first hit 100,000 in premium in 1 month, and boy, that was something else.
Right.
Now we're doing 1.5 million, 2 million in a month.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and then after a while, we started doing, like I said, in 2008, we started doing so much business. I had to hire employees they were agents, and they would sit there and I would just feed them the leads. And, we monitored everything. You have to measure everything. So that's kind of the other model that we had. So we had the two models together, and that kind of made up the base of what we were doing.
Got it. Okay. So ultimately, when a producer comes on board, as I recall from our work together, they have a kind of like a probationary period where they are fed some leads, right? And we can talk about where they come from, and then there's a transition where now they become personally responsible for their own leads.
That is correct. Yeah. So we,
Okay.
we would feed them, but it wasn't, it was a very short period that we would feed them leads. Um, and the funny thing about that is no matter how often you remind them that this is only temporary, we're feeding you leads.
Mm-hmm.
When the time came to turn the leads off, boy, they were like, well, what are you doing? I need, well, no, you've had your 90 days of leads. Now it's time to, and by the way, the whole time we were teaching them, I was teaching them on how
Right.
to generate the leads.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it wasn't a surprise. But ultimately, look, it's a difficult business out there, to get an agency, small little independent agency up and running, from scratch. So
Mm-hmm.
we went through a few agents. It was a pretty, our retention rate was maybe 25%.
Right. For agents.
For agents,
Right.
correct. Oh yeah,
Okay.
for agents,
Yeah.
yes.
Over time, did that improve, or is it, is that part of the nature of?
That is the nature of the beast. I don't, we might be at 30% now.
Uh-huh.
But it's done differently now because we can get into that later. But I sold the agency, so it's a little different now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, but the 30% who make it, uh, they make a good living, and some of them are genuinely superstars.
100%. I've got probably 15 guys that are doing, they're making really good six-figure incomes right now.
Yeah.
They've been with me 8 to 10 years, but
Hmm.
they're doing really well. They know before they get out of bed on January 1st, they're going to make, $250,000 or more before they get out of bed on January 1st.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah.
Because your model allows them to participate in their renewals.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. All right. So let's start to break this down a little bit, because you've got separation of function in the agency, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You've got CSRs who service
Uh-huh.
existing customers.
Hmm.
You've got I forget what we call that group, but the annual review team
Yeah. The
that
retention
handles
team.
the
The
retention
retention
team,
team.
right?
Yeah, they're our senior CSRs.
Yeah, you got your senior CSRs who are on the retention team, and then you've got producers.
Right.
Everybody sells.
Everybody that we someone taught me a long time ago that we are a sales organization and everybody sells.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's break these three teams down. Let's start with the producers. What is the producer's job after their? Actually, let's do it this way. I'm curious about that first 90 days, and I'm sure other people are as well. You're hiring these producers and you're feeding them leads. Where do these leads come from?
From being in the business for a long time, you just get leads.
Uh-huh.
So we used to have a outside marketing. He was an employee.
Mm-hmm.
He was a marketing executive, if you will, and he would go to our main source of leads when I first started was mortgage brokers. So the marketing executive would go out and generate leads, relationships with mortgage brokers, generating leads, and he would bring in easily 125, 150 quality leads every month. quality leads.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was phenomenal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, from day one with the contractor, the agent, we would let them know, hey, you're only going to get these leads for 90 days. So you need to make an appointment with our marketing executives and go on sales calls with him to see how he generates his leads. And that's kind of how we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, 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 and the big part of our lead generation was referrals. So everybody got referrals, especially the customer service department. So when referrals came in and we got a lot of them, we would distribute them to these new independent agents.
Got it. So I'm sure you've got, like you always had a lead bank of unconverted leads from, previous quote requests and
That's the
yeah.
next part of this. Yes,
Okay.
you build these lists, and I've got thousands of them.
Uh-huh.
So you build these lists and you market to these lists, and it's phenomenal. It's
Right.
really
And,
is
and
pretty
and
good.
these are lists generated by the agency, not lists that are purchased by the agency.
100, yes,
Right.
they're list
Okay.
generate. So if my close ratio is 65%, I'm going to have 35% of the people that I didn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
It's not if, but when I'm going to sell them.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so they get put back into the funnel, and then there's a 65% chance you're going to sell them if they're qualified. Okay, so
Yep.
you've got the
Yep.
unconverted leads, and then even with as high a retention as you've got some quote unquote lost souls. So they probably were in your lead bank as well, as I
Yep.
recall.
Yeah.
Okay,
Those are a separate drip campaign, but yes, absolutely.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, all right. So now the producers after the 90 days, the producer's responsible for now generating their own leads. What's the model? What's the technique that you teach them? Because more or less they all do the same thing.
So that has changed over the years.
Uh-huh.
So we'll take it one step at a time. So of course, mortgage broker referral leads, that was the number one lead generating system that we used, mortgage
Right.
broker. And
Mm-hmm.
by the way, that still works today,
Yeah.
100%. I got my guys that have been with me for 8, 10, 12 years, and they're still getting, it's amazing. They're still getting, 40 leads a month, and they can't even handle them half the
Right.
time. So they have,
Okay.
guess what they have
Mm-hmm.
to do? They have to hire somebody to help them.
Okay.
Um, they have to invest.
Right.
Um, so the next thing, of course, and it's easy. It's like taking candy from a baby. It's referrals. You ask for them, you're going to get them. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
And then the third one, of course, is the lost souls, or the ones that you didn't close the first time around. You just set up a drip system, and you're going to get 3, 4 sales a month out of doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy.
Got it.
Um, of course, nowadays, bringing everybody up to speed, there's Facebook and social media and all that stuff, which I understand how that works. I've just have never done it, but I have many agents that are super successful doing
And
it.
they do it, right? You don't have to do it. They do it.
I do not do it, nor did I teach them how to do it, because I just didn't know how to
Got
do
it.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
But
it.
that's certainly something that is working, and it's working very well.
Okay. So again, we can take questions when Mike and I are done here. So that's the producer group. Then you've got the CSR group,
Correct.
right? Not the, so let's talk about the CSRs, not the senior CSRs yet. Um, Obviously, I've been to your agency. You were gracious enough to host a mastermind meeting once at your agency. And I recall once we walked into the CSR room and everybody had a whiteboard behind them. Tell us about the whiteboard story.
So, yeah, the whiteboard came from, I think, one of the books you recommended.
Actually, I think it was when you came to we had a meeting, a mastermind meeting at Bend when the office was in Bend.
Yes.
And I had whiteboards behind all of my sales reps.
Yeah.
So everybody could see how many Quantum Club memberships they sold, how many boot camps they sold, and how many
Yeah.
CSR masteries they sold, and whatever else we happen to be selling. And boom, next thing I know, we show up at your shop, and there's your whiteboards were really big, and there were whiteboards behind every CSR, and they were responsible for making tick marks under 5
Correct.
different categories.
Yeah.
So
They were
everybody could see everything. What do you
the
recall?
lead indicators for retention is what
Is
they were. They were
Yeah,
lead
okay.
indicators. So
So
yeah.
what yeah, and I think your big 5 may have changed over time, but
Yeah.
regardless, yeah,
Yeah, those
basically,
are the things that we worked on every day. Everybody knew about the big 5. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How does this work? Everybody had their own whiteboard, so you could see what each individual
hmm
customer service rep was doing.
right.
And then at the end of every month, they would all go to the big whiteboard and they would add their numbers to the big whiteboard. And they were held accountable for their numbers, and it
Yeah,
worked
right.
very well.
So your big 5, they were what? Upsells, endorsements, life insurance, referrals, and I can't remember what the
And
fifth,
cross sells,
and cross sells are.
cross sells. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
cross
got
sells.
it.
So
All
that
right.
was the big 5.
Everybody could
And
see everything. Okay.
and we called them the lead indicators because everything right there that you just said is tied to retention. Everything. It's just
Yeah.
yeah, it's right
Okay.
there.
This episode is brought to you by the Society of Insura-Preneurs, guiding owners to the insurance trifecta of faster growth, higher margins, and peak valuation. If you want a clear and reliable roadmap to growth, download our free 5-step 30% growth blueprint at www.insurapreneur.com with a dash in the middle. It's the same system that's helped agencies double, triple, and even 10x in size, and it's yours free. Visit insurapreneur.com. On the surface, this seems like such an obvious thing to do, which is to, be completely transparent about performance. When we
Yeah.
think of, for example, when we think of sports, everybody knows how many baskets and how many assists and how many blocks and how many three
How
pointers and
many
so on.
sacks, how many catches, how many
Yeah.
yeah, there.
Okay.
And
So,
by the way, it's
yeah.
digital now. So we don't use the white we use the big
Oh,
whiteboard in
you've
the
moved
office,
to a
but it is
digital
digital.
whiteboard.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
digital. Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right, so now let's move on to team number 3, the what you call the retention team.
Those are our senior. So right now we have probably 22, depending upon the day, we have 22 to 25 customer service representatives.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, again, depending upon the day, 7 to 10 senior customer service reps. And their sole responsibility is to do annual reviews for the customers. And that's all they do.
Mm-hmm.
They do anywhere from 4 to 6 reviews a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives them time to prepare for the next day when they've got their reviews. Cross sells, upsells, just they've got a checklist of like 15 things that they've got to do when they're doing a review. And they've got to go through that and hit all the checklists, and that's how they get graded.
Okay, so let's walk through the model for the annual review. Because it's not chaotic, it's not random, it's not haphazard. As I recall, it starts with an email drip campaign. What is it, 75 or 90 days in advance, or when do you start that?
Yeah, yeah, it's 75 days in advance where they
Okay.
get a little message, happy little email saying, hey, your policy is coming up for renewal. It's time to review your policies to ensure there's no gaps or overlaps in your coverages. Click here to schedule a date and time so we can get together and get that done for you.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
Uh,
they get reminders and everything else. So yeah, and
mhm.
then when
And
the
and they
appointed
so they schedule the appointment, and it
Mhm.
gets does it get round robin to the next CSR, or are they
Our,
all
our,
or
our assistant customer service manager assigns those depending
okay.
upon what's going on in the
Hmm.
lives and the world of everybody around them.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So boom, that has resulted in not only, significant policy per customer count for a larger agency, but a pretty good retention. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, look, when you get to, 75 million, 90 million, 100 million, 130 million, retention is a tough thing.
Right.
It's really, really tough. So
Hmm.
we hover between 90 and 91% retention for a book that large. That's not that bad.
Yeah.
It's hard to move the needle on that. The needle is slow, but we work on it every day.
Got it. All
Yeah,
right. Okay.
yeah, and it's obviously it's a huge part of the business model because
Hmm.
you got to have it. You can't have somebody has to shut the back door,
Yeah.
otherwise people will
Or the
leave.
people want to walk out. Okay.
Yeah,
Um, there are a few principles that I think you've genuinely mastered, Mike, and we've covered a number of them. One of them is what we commonly call ACORE, or the
ah,
ACORE
ah,
marketing model.
yes.
Um, and that's something that we designed, or it is one of our teachings, to help people think like marketers, right? In other words, to help people engineer the systems that build the business. Tell us a little bit about, like,
Sure.
why that was a big deal for Mike Mathisen.
You know, it is the basis of everything that we do at the agency. It
Hmm.
just is. It's the Bible, the Bible, if you will. It's the playbook. It is who we are. And if you think about it and you think really hard about it and you look at it and you dissect it, attract, convert, optimize, and retain, it's so simple, but yet if you look at it and you have strategies for each one of those, and you implement the strategies, that's what makes the machine run. That's where the insurance factory comes from. Because you
Right.
get them on the conveyor belt and you just
Hmm.
keep them going, keep them
Hmm.
moving. So really, it's about dissecting each one of those in the ACORE system and put it to work for your advantage and make sure everybody on your team understands it. That they know, hey, this is who we are and this is what we're going to do.
Right.
So yeah, it's that important. It's the baseline of everything.
There is a related principle that I think you also mastered, which we loosely would say know your numbers. We would call it
Right.
know your numbers, right? And
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
can recall uh, several times where you would show up at a mastermind meeting, and people might be asking questions, or maybe feeling like, gosh, I wish I had a better finger on the pulse of something. Like, how many leads did we get last month? I don't know. What's our conversion rate? I don't know. I mean, that's not uncommon in the industry. And you would pull out a spreadsheet and you'd be able to demonstrate exactly how many leads you got last month, exactly what the conversion rate, exactly what the policy per customer count was, exactly what the retention rate was. Um, how did you do that, and what did that mean to you to have that level of sort of mastery of the internal operation of the agency and the way it's expressed numerically?
Well, if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and
Yeah.
we've all heard that
You don't know
before.
what's wrong, right? Yeah, I mean, you don't know
Yeah.
how many leads you got. You don't know what's wrong. You don't know where your system is falling down. And so
Yeah.
many people don't know what their conversion rate was. So
The,
obviously, yeah, it became something. It's important to everybody, but you really mastered it.
the big one for me was the retention thing. Um,
Always.
it's just it's at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And then you add all those lead indicators that we talked about, the big five and all that. But the retention, if you don't have a good retention and your team doesn't understand retention and you don't know why your retention is good or bad, I mean, you've got to dig into the numbers and know your numbers because if you don't know, let me get give you an example back to retention. Our agents were not allowed to sell monoline policies. They had to sell
Uh-huh.
package
Hmm.
policies. We
Right.
wouldn't do it. You just couldn't do it in the
Hmm.
agency.
Hmm.
Um, Things were a little different now because of the market conditions, but that helps retention right out of the gate. If you don't sell monoline policies, it just doesn't work in a business model that you care about retention.
Hmm.
Um, so just those simple things about knowing your numbers, about what your close ratio is. If your close ratio is bad, maybe you're getting bad leads, and you got to think about that. How can I get better leads?
Hmm.
What do I have to do to get better leads? Maybe I've got to ask better questions, or this is all sales 101, right?
Um, yeah. If so, I want to sort of go back up to, a big picture question.
Sure.
Um, because, as you said, yes, you've sold your agency. Um, and you're looking back at your legacy. If you were going to have a conversation with the Mike Mathisen of 20 plus years ago, back when you started with $6 million, and give wise counsel to the younger Mike, what do you think you would say?
So I think I've told you this story before, Michael. When I first got involved with your organization, Quantum Club is what it used to be.
Hmm.
Um, well, I used to go to the meetings. I loved the meetings. They were awesome. They weren't quite mastermind, but they were really great
Well, they
meetings.
were big, right? They were,
They
yeah,
were
they were a
big.
little too big for mastermind. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you used to send out all this marketing material to the people that were members of the club. And I used to take that stuff and I would throw them on the table over there, put them underneath my desk. I'm too busy to get to that stuff. So, to answer your question, I wish I had looked at that stuff a little sooner. It took me probably 2, 3 years to walk over to that stuff, that pile of stuff that you sent me, and start going through it. Start listening to those tapes and those CDs that morphed into CDs. And that's probably what I would tell myself. Hey, start listening to this stuff. You've been paying for it for a while. And by the way, after listening to them, like, yeah, this is pretty good stuff. And then I started to really, really internalize it and then start coming to more of the meetings. And then I joined the mastermind club. And boy, that was the biggest difference in the world.
Ah, okay. Well, thank you for that. Anything else that you would say? Basically, just pay attention and run the system.
Run the system, invest, um, hire the great people, remain focused. Um, think really hard about the mastermind club, because not only did I get good relationships from that, but oh my God, the whole concept of being involved with these people that are in the same industry, sharing ideas is just phenomenal. It really is.
Yeah. All right. Mike, I do have one more question for you, and then I'll open it up for questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you are at a point where you have a legacy. You've done something that, frankly, you can be proud of. Also, something that so many other people can learn from. Um, we've had some discussions about this. Have you reflected on what you think you want to do next?
I have reflected on it, and what I've done best in my career is help other people get to where they want to go and where they
Hmm.
want to be. Um, and I've really been, I mean, I look around at some of the people that I've, interacted with, and some of them are doing really, really well. And a
Right.
lot of it, look, a lot of it is because I'm associated with Michael Jans and his mastermind group. But I want to continue doing that if I can, helping people become the build the agencies that that they think they can do, and I want to help them become those people, become those successful agents. If I
Well,
can do that, because that's really what I've done throughout my whole career, and it's really means a lot to me.
got it. All right. Well, I'll encourage everybody to stay tuned because we'll figure out some way to make that happen. So, and I know that you are you're really my special guest speaker, even though you're a member. Are still a special presenter at our next mastermind meeting in Tempe, where you'll really be able to dig into some of the details and share the techniques.
What'll be great about that is you're there in person and you get to have conversations that are meaningful.
Yeah,
That's what'll be great about it.
right on. All right.
Yeah.
Mike, let's turn to the audience, folks. So if anybody does have questions, now is a rare opportunity to talk to one of the masters of the industry. So you can raise your digital hand, and I should be able to see that, or you can put something into chat. And I'll read your question if you put it in chat. I do have a comment that came in earlier, Mike, from Trey White, who said he quit selling insurance with 3 or 4 exclamation marks. You've been telling me that. So yes, I've been telling Trey that. Okay, so Trey,
Trey,
thank you for
stop
sharing
selling
that.
insurance. And
Um,
you know what the funny thing about that? I hear people say, "Yeah, I'm going to stop. I'm going to wait till the first of the year."
All right. Okay. Rare opportunity to ask Mike a direct question. If anybody's got one, please raise your hand. And if not, I don't see that anybody's got their little digital hand raised. So that being said, Mike, I do look forward to, here we go. From Sam Greaves, a fellow mastermind member. Oh, we got a few questions coming in. All right. Mike Fraley, what triggers a decision to sell a successful and thriving firm? That's interesting. And how much time were you spending selling on day to day or agency operations? So we got 2 questions from Michael Fraley. First one is, what triggers a decision to sell a successful and thriving firm?
You know, I was near selling. I thought about it in 2019, 2018. I started thinking about it because we were getting pretty big, and I just thought it was time to look into it because everybody sells no matter what. There's no exceptions. Everybody will sell eventually. Um, what did it for me was two of the other mastermind members were in process of selling their agencies, and they referred me to the leader of the group that was purchasing the agencies.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down with them, and I really thought to myself, I said, these are good guys. They've got a good model that they want to buy my agency, bring me into the fold, and I knew and trusted the 2 gentlemen that referred them to me that they were selling their agency. Um, and then at the end of the day, I looked at it and they were offering me a really nice price on the agency and long term. I could grow long term with them. So because I did stick around for an additional 5.5 years after the sale. That's kind of what brought me to the decision. Yes, I'm going to sell the agency. It was hard to do, by the way, but I'm glad I did it.
You glad you did it? Okay.
100%.
Got
Yes.
it. Okay. And here is the next question from Michael, and I'm gonna give a preliminary answer and then pass it on to you. The question is, how much time were you spending before selling on day to day or agency operations? I recall a conversation we had, Mike. This was in the casita. So this was when I was living in Arizona and hosting mastermind meetings in my casita. And you had indicated, number one, that you had grown 30% the previous year, and number two, that you were working about 20 hours a week and you really had a hard time finding a way to fill those 20 hours. And so my conclusion on that was you were doing exactly what the mastermind was all about, which was
Yes.
being an insurapreneur, building systems and hiring good people to run those systems. So boom. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I
Yeah, well,
really,
no,
that story stands out to me.
yeah, that's exactly right. And that brings back to, you manage by the numbers, which is what we talked about. I
Hmm.
mean, the numbers came to me every month and I'd look at them and I say, oh, this number is a trending down. I don't like that. Let me fix that. And all I had to do was go in and talk again about what that number meant and why we had to keep track of it and why it meant so much. And the next month I'd see it raise a little bit, and the month after that go up a little. So yeah, it was you have good people and you manage your good people and you pay them well, so they do and they're loyal to you and they do the best job. So that yeah.
This is an observation I've got about the agency. um, is that once you got some clarity about your growth model, you stuck to it and you kept refining and refining and refining. So in the early days, it was you were doing some of the work.
Oh,
And then you
yeah.
hired people and you were doing the training of the people who did the work. Then you got to the point where you had to hire, because you had so many people. I don't know how many employees you ended up with.
I
About,
ended up with about 100, a little more than 100
yeah,
employees
over
at
100 employees. So
when I
then,
sold.
you weren't training, you were hiring people who were the trainers and the managers. So
I had two trainers at
we
one
had at
time.
least one meeting where your sales manager attended the mastermind meeting. So
Yep.
yeah,
Mhm.
you kept moving up and up. So not only did the organization grow and that forced you up to sort of a higher, more strategic level, but also you didn't ignore like what was happening in the street, on the field. You were watching the real numbers, and if one of the systems was not meeting your expectations, you'd go tweak that system and increase it or enhance and improve that system.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was just at the end of the day, my responsibility was developing the leaders in the agency. And the way I did that was by watching the numbers and showing them the numbers and saying, okay, I didn't tell them how to fix it.
Hmm.
Usually I said, tell me how you're going to fix
Tell
this.
me
And
how
we
you're going to
talked,
fix it.
we
Okay.
we talked about it.
Right.
And
Right.
I said, well, that's a great idea. How are we going to implement that?
Hmm.
So it was their idea, not my idea.
Okay.
Now I knew
Um,
the answer, but I let
yeah.
that.
Of course you did. All right. We have a question from Sam Greaves, fellow mastermind member. We're curious about the 1099 model. That's part one. And how did you find or attract these people? Okay, the turnover. So help me out with the language there, Sam. You can raise your hand, but I think we get the essence of it. One is like the 1099 model. How obviously that needs to be justified from an IRS perspective. How did you run the
That's the biggest thing.
1099? Yeah.
That's the biggest
What
issue.
made that work? Hiring them as 1099s as opposed to employees.
When you're hiring 1099, quite honestly, it's like herding cats. Um, you've got to, and you're right on with the IRS. You've got to understand what you can and cannot do. So basically, what I did was I knew I knew the difference between an employee and an independent contractor, and I structured my agreements to coincide with that. Um,
Hmm.
the agency owned all of the business that was produced, and we had a revenue sharing agreement within the agreement.
Hmm.
So we would share the revenue. Um, and then with regard to expectations, the expectations, I never wrote the expectations down. Well, I did, but we had expectations. And if they weren't meeting expectations, I could cancel the agreement at any time, as they could too. We both had
Right.
I could say, this isn't working out and we're gonna part company now. Or I could say, you're not meeting expectations. What are you going to do to increase your production? And that would go on back and forth for a few months. And if they didn't increase their production, they knew that I could give them a 30-day notice and we would part company. And they could do the same to me, by the way. If I wasn't living up to their expectations, they could fire me and they could go somewhere else.
Here's part two of Sam's question. How did you find or attract these people? So what do you, you've done this a long time now. What do you think worked best to attract high quality producers?
Yeah, that's really difficult to answer. And it's always been a moving needle. You know, we used to use personality tests. They work, but not really. We used to use what was it called? Monster.com.
Yeah,
Yeah, we used
yeah.
to use them and call all the resumes, and then we'd have to interview. And it was a very tedious process. And I had people doing all that. And then when we got down to it, they'd give me the best of the best. And then I would go in and hire. And then if they didn't work out, it'd be my fault, which is fine. I can take that. But it was a difficult process. I guess one of the biggest things was, if you don't mind me saying, Michael, you can't hire any a-holes.
A players.
A players, but not. And really, you got to weed these people out because some people are just too difficult to work with.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you got to really be careful about who you hire. If I hired 5 people in a month, which that's kind of what I used to do, I would only end up with 1, maybe 2 out of those 5. I mean, that's just the way it was.
Right. But they would prove themselves to be on one side of the fence or the other within 90 days or less.
Yes. I mean, you have to have clarity and you have to have good conversations with people up front as to what your expectations are. You really do. And we had so many, we used to give them tests before we hired them, and we did the whole thing. And so it's a tough process.
Yeah. Okay. We have 2 more questions, and then we'll see what happens after that. The next one is from Sandro. And Sandro, good, you're still here. Sandro, you need to come to our next meeting in Tempe because Mike is going to be there to really, be able to get into some of the down and dirty on some of these details. So, Mike, I'm going to leave it up to you as to how much detail you want to get into on these questions. What are some specific compensation models you use for producers? I'm sure there were several. Commission only, base salary plus commission, and what rates did you offer? And is there a difference between new and renewals?
Michael, I appreciate that question, and I really think that needs to be done in person, because it's just not numbers. You got to understand why we do the numbers and how we do the numbers. So hopefully he comes to the mastermind meeting and we're able to, and we'll definitely dig into that. I mean, that's really a good question. So
yeah,
I just don't think this is the right forum to answer that question.
I mean, you do provide some support for a while, but my concern about it is that it is such I don't want people to like take a little data point and run without understanding the full picture. There's a little bit of danger in that. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. Sandro, we'll get you what you need. Trey, when growing the business, did you encounter issues with producers writing bad business? I'm sure that's never happened, right? And how did you manage the profitability of each of your carriers? So yeah, a couple of really interesting questions. So
Yeah,
again,
so
fellow mastermind member, we're going to see him in Tempe for sure.
We had a field underwriting team. Within my team, I had a field underwriting team. I had 2 field underwriters that would underwrite everything before it got to the underwriter in the carrier. And they had a checklist. Again, I'm big on checklists. They had a checklist. They went down. What's the limits of liability? Is there collision? The whole thing, the home policies. We had a whole checklist for the home policies. And if it didn't pass the mustard test, we'd send it back to them and say, you got to talk to. And you don't have to do it too many times to an agent when they learn that they can't do that.
Right. Okay. Got it. And if they were consistently recalcitrant, I'm sure they just didn't survive.
Well, they didn't fit into our model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second part, this is an interesting question. How did you manage the profitability of each of your carriers?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you represented, some of the country's premier carriers.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We, look, at the end of the day, and I said this face to face with CEOs of carriers with regard to profitability. You set the underwriting guidelines, you set the rates, you're in charge of the claims. I'm fitting into your sweet spot with the business I'm writing.
Hmm.
What else do you want me to do here? What
Yeah.
can I possibly do to help you
Hmm.
be more profitable? And,
Hmm.
they don't really have an answer for that because it's true. They set all the rates. They underwrite the business.
Yeah.
I give them what they want, the sweet spot. I get awards for it every year. It's like,
You did you consistently were in Safeco's, what's their premier category?
I don't know what they're calling it right now, but yeah.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, Progressive too. All of them, all of them. Allied. I've been all over the world with their trips because I'm top dog and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Allied now nationwide.
Allied now nationwide. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Safeco now Liberty.
yeah. All right. Boom. Yes. Comment from Trey. Good point. So,
All right.
all right. I think we've exhausted all the questions. So, Mike, I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. And, yeah, you know how I feel about you.
Just
So,
just a quick parting thought, Michael.
yeah.
I would say that the being in the mastermind group was the biggest um, thing for me to move my agency forward, to take it from 10x to 25x. Um, Being in the mastermind group, I would say that, and I say this because you know how I feel about the mastermind group and what you do for agencies. I mean, if Michael Jan says this is what's working, you got to listen to him because it really is. I mean, it's what's going on. He knows what he's talking about. So um, not every strategy is going to work for you. Pick and choose which one is going to work and work on it hard, and it's going to make you successful. So I hope that helps.
Helps a lot, and I'm humbled. So when we're done, I'll go shed a few tears, and
Oh gosh,
so
I'll give you a hanky.
okay, all righty. Well, again, look forward to seeing you, and hopefully, we'll be able to provide a platform where you can share your wisdom with the industry. So,
Yeah, I'll
with
be interested to see the different models that are there at the meeting.
yeah,
That really is interesting to me. Who's
yeah,
doing what?
uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to the audience that was able to join us, thanks so much. Lori Augustiniak, maybe you're saying that to me. She said, great seeing you. So it was marvelous to see you, and at least to see your little picture on my screen. And a lot of old friends. There we are with the Florida coast right behind you, and yeah, beautiful. And the PIA logo. Yeah, I know about that. So
You didn't say anything about the bar being behind me.
you didn't say anything about the fact that I've moved and now I actually have an office in my house instead of being in the dining room where my wet bar was like right behind me.
I can't really see you. The picture is so small on my phone.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well,
All
it's
right.
really terrific to see everybody. Mike Mathisen, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks again.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Hi, Michael Jans again. And before we wrap up, let me share Something that still inspires me to this day. One of our early Blueprint members, Lee Henry, showed the insurance world what is truly possible. He installed a system that allowed him to take 26 weeks off every year while growing his agency by $400,000 in commissions, not just for 1 year, but year after year after year. That's the power of working on your business, not just in it. If you're ready to transform your insurance business, and I think you are, if you're listening to this podcast, visit Insura-Preneur.com with a dash in the middle to get your copy of the 5-step blueprint for fast growth and peak valuation. This is the same system that's helped agencies grow from $6 million to $120 million or more in premium. Please don't let another day go by without exploring what's possible for your agency. Head to Insura-Preneur.com and download the blueprint. Meanwhile, keep challenging the status quo and don't just beat your own records, beat industry records. Build a business that gives you and your family the life of your dreams. This is Michael Jans, and you've been listening to the Insura-Preneur podcast. And remember, Insura-Preneur has a dash in the middle. So go dash there and get a copy of your blueprint. Talk to you soon.